Good evening. I'm Kelly Wright. Thanks for joining me as we spend the next hour together. I am hoping that you're safe and well, taking care of yourself and your family because you matter. My opening observations tonight, it's been an emotional roller coaster this week with so much heartbreak and so much emotion, and yet the steely resolve among so many Americans to try to keep moving forward in the face of heartbreak and adversity. You'll recall that on Monday, we were announcing to the world that 200,000 deaths from the COVID-19 pandemic had hit Americans, and the cases exploding to more than 7 million cases in the United States alone. When it comes to the coronavirus, the United States is in a category that it never wanted to be. It is leading the world in the number of deaths and cases. And then we lost Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and the outpouring of love and support for her, and also the political aspects of picking someone who will replace her on the Supreme Court. That fight looming large in the Senate as the president will make his choice tomorrow from the White House at 5 p.m. And then there's the sadness and the heartbreak with the outcome of the grand jury findings in Kentucky relating to Breonna Taylor, the young EMT first responder who at the age of 26 was shot multiple times and died from those bullet shots from the officers involved in that case, the Louisville Police Department, 3 officers, none of them charged in her death. And the family, saddened, angry, heartbroken, that the Kentucky Attorney General, Daniel Cameron, could not step in and provide justice the way they think justice should come for the loss of Breonna Taylor's life. Man's inhumanity towards man continues to plague our country, and people are stating enough is enough. And yet, the family of Breonna Taylor, acknowledging that fact, is also urging people to peacefully protest, not retaliate or resort to violence, but lift up the name of Breonna Taylor and to continue to say her name everywhere they go. And those are my opening observations. First, we take you to the passing of RBG. In a world that is so polarized with so much tension and divide, we begin tonight with a final look at a woman who fought to bring people together all of her life, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Today, marking the first time ever a woman has lied in state in the United States Capitol. Thousands of people gathered at the U.S. Supreme Court and the U.S. Capitol to express an outpouring of love and support for the justice who would become known as the notorious RBG. Her rabbi giving a moving eulogy in remembering Ginsburg.
Today, she makes history again as the first woman and the first Jewish woman to lie in state. Today, we stand in sorrow, and tomorrow, we, the people, must carry on Justice Ginsburg's legacy. Even as our hearts are breaking, we must rise with her strength and move forward. She was our prophet, our North Star, our strength for so very long. Now she must be permitted to rest after toiling so hard for every single one of us. May the memory of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Yita Rochel Batziro Leah, forever and ever be a blessing. Zichrona Livracha. God, give us the strength and bless us with the courage, the intelligence, the bravery, and the unbreakable resolve to pursue justice. Amen.
Famous opera star Denise Graves, a personal friend of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, performed for her dearly departed friend, singing "America, I Gave Myself to You," a song that captures the essence of RBG, who most of her life worked tirelessly against obstacles that stood in the way of women and those who have been marginalized and forgotten. We listen now to Denise Graves as we go to break.
I've received, let me know in my heart when my days are through. America, America, I gave my best to you.
Attorney Baker and Aguiar, and I know without a shadow of a doubt, without the activist community saying her name, there is no way we would have gotten this far with all over the world people saying Breonna Taylor's name. Say her name.
Welcome back to the program. You're watching civil rights attorney Ben Crump in Louisville, Kentucky, leading the family of Breonna Taylor and supporters in saying out loud the name of Breonna Taylor, who was killed on March 13th in her own apartment by Louisville police. On Wednesday, the grand jury and Kentucky Attorney General Daniel Cameron explained that only one of 3 officers involved in Taylor's death would face a lesser charge of wanton endangerment, and that charge was for a neighbor's apartment. No charges were ever brought against the officers responsible for firing 6 bullets into Breonna Taylor's body. Today, the family spoke during a news conference. Taylor's aunt, wearing the EMT jacket that her niece Breonna used to wear as a first responder, reading the emotional and heartbreaking words of Breonna's mother, Tamika Palmer, too emotional to speak.
I was reassured Wednesday of why I have no faith in the legal system, in the police, in the law that are not made to protect us Black and brown people. But when I speak on it, I'm considered an angry Black woman. But know this, I am an angry Black woman. I am not angry for the reasons that you would like me to be. That's right. I'm sorry. But angry because our Black women keep dying at the hands of police officers and Black men. Okay, angry because our children are dying at the hands of police officers. And I'm angry because this nation is learning that our Black women dying at the hands of police officers, and this is not okay. You can take the dog out of the fight, but you can't take the fight out of the dog.
Say it again.
For lack of better terms, bark bark for being the dog still standing to fight.
Yeah.
I knew Cameron would never do his job, but what I do know is that him and countless others will go to bed sleeping with Breonna's face, still hearing her say her name. Cameron alone didn't fail her, but it ended with the lack of investigation failed her. The officer who told a lie to obtain a search warrant failed her. The judge who signed the search warrant failed her. The terrorist who broke down her door failed her. The system as a whole has failed her. You didn't just rob me of my family, you robbed the world of a queen. A queen willing to do a job that most of us could never stomach to do. A queen willing to build up anyone around her. A queen who was starting to pave her path. I hope you never have to know the pain of knowing your child is in need and help and you're not able to give them. I hope you never hear the sounds of hearing someone cry and beg for your child to get help and she never receives help. Those cries was ignored. I hope you never know the pain of your child being murdered 191 days in a row. Tamika Palmer.
Well said.
I am so sorry. So sorry you gotta go through this. So sorry. It's unacceptable. But your family got your back.
Yes.
We got
You're not
your
going
back.
nowhere
We got your back.
until Freedom has your back.
That's right.
Lanita has your back.
right.
Ben has your back. Your daddy has your back. And guess what? this party. These people are out here stomping on these grounds. That's your back.
Bianca Austin, the aunt of Breonna Taylor, and certainly an emotional day in Louisville, Kentucky, and it continues to be one of emotion, of sadness and anger. Yet the Taylor family is urging everyone to peacefully protest and not resort to any violence at all, but to honor Breonna Taylor by saying her name and demanding justice from the state of Kentucky. We'll continue to follow the developments of this story. When we return, a panel discussion about police reform. That and more next. Joining me now to talk about all that's going on in our world here in the United States. Of course, we've been rocked by the decision from what took place in the Breonna Taylor grand jury with one charge of wanton endangerment for one police officer. The other two police officers who were actually in the apartment where Breonna lived were not charged with anything. It raises the issue of trust in the community between the police and the community. We want to talk about police reform in tonight's show. So joining me now for this special segment of the Kelly Wright Show called United We Serve is my good friend, retired Sergeant Major Keith L. Craig. He is a decorated veteran of the United States Army for 32 years. He has fought in campaigns on the battlefields to save America and help America and protect the freedoms we hold dear. He is also an executive for Disney in terms of being there for the distribution aspects of it. He's worked on the film and distributed the film Black Panther, as well as Avengers Endgame. I could go on, but he has a wonderful book called Serving to Lead. And Keith, before I bring in our other guests, talk to me about why this book is so important. And you've been recognized, by the way, as an international best-selling author.
I think, Kelly, this book was important for me because growing up, I didn't have that mentor that I was looking for at an early age. So, I decided to devise a tool, if you will. I call it a tool for your tool bag. That doesn't mean that you're not a great leader or anything like that. That means if you want to enhance what it is that you know, or you want to just, learn some things, different systems without applying, you can just, grab my book and it just help you out going through life. So certainly it was important to me just to help out someone who used to be like me back in the day.
And your passion, of course, is to help other men and women in all capacities of life, from all backgrounds of life, serve to lead. But in particular, I know you have a utmost concern about what's happening in America today, particularly as it pertains to Black Americans. What are your concerns about police reform in those communities?
Well, I just believe I'm an advocate of don't defund the police officers. I think you should refund. And when I say that, I mean reallocate resources to the communities at large. And I come in with the acronym that calls TURN, which is training, education, ratio, as well as the mental health aspect of it, putting a component in place, that helped out the police officers. Because I believe, in America, it only requires you 672 hours to become a police officer. In 36 states, you're able to be on the police force before even going to basic training. Back in the day, there's no way I could become a soldier before going to basic training. Then after basic training, I have to go to advanced individual training, which is to help you understand how to use the skills you just learned. So in comparison, if you look at it, it takes you 1,300 hours to become a certified barber. It takes you 2 years of trade school to become a plumber. So you're telling me if the threat is a lot more substantial to a police officer, 672 hours is all you need to get a badge and a gun to protect and serve the community? I don't think so.
Well, my friend, you have set the stage for our panel discussion tonight. United We Serve. How do we deal with police reform in America? So let me introduce the rest of our panel. We have, and I'll start with the ladies first, we have Nikessa Craig. And if you're wondering if there is a relation, this is the retired Sergeant Major Keith L. Craig's daughter. But Nikessa, in her own right, is the founder and CEO of Whole Journey. She's a licensed clinical social worker operating out of Virginia. Also joining us is Dr. Geoffrey Mount Varner. Geoffrey Mount Varner is one who talks about saving lives. Not only does he talk about it, he actually does it because he is an ER physician and he is in his scrubs right now. We'll talk more about that and how police reform and how that impacts him as well. Also joining us from Philadelphia, Police Lieutenant, Philadelphia Police Department, Jonathan Josie. Josie, good of you to join us today as well.
Good morning. Thank you for the invite. I appreciate it.
I want to start with you, Josie. Keith was talking about the fact that we don't need to defund the police, but refund them, meaning that you allocate the dollars to be better utilized in other aspects of policing. How important is that? And one, do you agree with Keith, or are there other factors that you want to point out?
I am in complete agreement with what Keith said. I think the thing about it is a lot of these incidents around the country have highlighted or spotlighted the most underserved and underserved areas of society by police. You know, minorities. So racism is always an issue. Race is always an issue, and it's also highlighting the underserved of something that's also unaddressed often, which is mental illness. A lot of times, a lot of incidents or interactions with police involve individuals suffering from mental illness, and oftentimes they end up turning badly where someone is hurt or someone is injured by police. And I think that those funds need to be, like you said, refunded and redistributed and reallocated elsewhere to not only assist those areas, but to assist us into building better programs or building better directives and things to teach us a lot better how to interact with those individuals so these incidents don't go badly.
We're going to take a break. I'm joined by Keith L. Craig, retired Sergeant Major of the United States Army, 32 years of service, decorated war veteran, as well as a Disney executive. And then, of course, Lieutenant Jonathan Josie, Philadelphia Police Department, but also a police expert in looking at how the fabric of America has to be one that we learn how to trust police and police learn how to trust us in our own communities. When we return, we'll talk about the mental health aspects and the medical aspects with Nikessa Craig, as well as Dr. Geoffrey Mount Varner. And we'll continue on with our conversation, United We Serve. Coming right back after this. Welcome back to the program. So I'm joined by Sergeant Major Keith L. Craig. Keith, you're serving kind of as my co-host as this, because we came up with this idea of United We Serve to do it on a weekly or biweekly basis to talk about serving America with leadership. So you were talking earlier about the mental health aspects in not defunding, but refunding police. Having stated that, talk to me about you and your daughter, Nikessa Craig, and how she, as a professional, a licensed clinical social worker, is actively engaged in helping people understand the mental stress that police go through and that the community goes through.
Well, yes. I mean, throughout the years, she's been telling me about all the professionals that she helps throughout the year, and you know, she's been an advocate for me as far as I myself, need mental health. So she was the one who inspired me to be able to go seek help and things of that nature. And I understand the importance of it. So, with that, and that's how the book also was birthed out of our conversation. So every week she helps me. So I understand how important it is to have mental health in your life to help calibrate, things you may be going through day in, day out.
Nikessa, we're all facing some sort of stress these days because of COVID-19, the pandemic, the racial unrest that's unfolding in our country. And then we're in the throes of a political election where we're hearing all kinds of things coming from the campaign trail. But the Breonna Taylor incident and the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, all of that has galvanized people's raw emotions. What kind of fallout are you seeing from a mental health perspective? And how does that impact policing in communities of color? And it's a loaded question as well. How does that impact uh, Black Americans and their perceptions of police?
Thanks for having me on. I will say that, of course, with all the recent activity, we're seeing an increase. You know, the phones are ringing off the hook. People are feeling extremely overwhelmed. But I think how it really is affecting the Black community is more and more race-based trauma. You know, more and more feelings of unsafety, disappointment, hurt, especially speaking to the fallout of the Breonna Taylor um, grand jury findings. So we're finding that people are extremely overwhelmed, angry, really experiencing a range of emotions and not really knowing where to turn. As it relates to policing, it's really important. Lieutenant Josie actually brought it up, but mental health is actually a large percentage of police contact interactions. And so a lot of police departments will report that at least 10% of their interactions are sometimes connected to mental health issues, whether diagnosed or they're being untreated. And what this really leads to is oftentimes officers being placed in a position where they're dealing with things and issues that are just outside of their scope, you know, and so that leads to a lot of hypervigilance, a lot of overreactiveness, and a lot of not really just getting to the underlying issues that the person or the persons that they're encountering are actually experiencing. And so unfortunately, when we're looking at that from a statistical standpoint, we see 1 in 4 killings often being linked to issues actually related to mental health. And so when the idea of actually looking at how to reallocate resources comes into play, there are templates out there with cities who have decided to actually create another frontline a frontline response instead of sending an armed officer to the scene, sending out social workers, sending out crisis responders. And so in cities like Denver, even New Orleans has enacted a system in which they're sending out more privatized security for minor traffic accidents. And we know how oftentimes Black Americans who are the victims of killings, it often is linked to minor traffic accidents. You know, even when we think about George Floyd, the issue that initially led to the encounter was over a counterfeit $20 bill. So we see a lot of senseless killings that are coming from issues that police officers are having to deal with that are just out of their scope. And if we focused on finding other frontline resources and alternatives, we could see this issue actually being decreased, if not eliminated over time.
So we've got a lot of work to do. Let me bring in Dr. Joffrey Mount Varner, emergency room physician, and he's committed to saving lives. He talks about it, he writes about it. But the other thing you do, Dr. Mount Varner, is that you write about community policing in the Black community and how Black men, women, and children should get home alive when they are confronted with police. Talk to me about that.
Well, it's tears taste salty. Tears taste salty, meaning it doesn't matter what color you are. And I'm sorry about those officers who were killed in the riots the other night. But we should also think about those family members of other people who were killed. At the end of the day, we are all charged with changing the world. Why? Because the world needs to be changed, and it's the right thing to do. And as it relates to officers, and mind you, I've always wanted to be a police officer. I cannot let you get away with, I was afraid for my life. Why? Do you ever hear a fireman say, I was scared to run into that building? Do you ever hear a doctor say, I'm scared of that blood? Hey, it's a dangerous job, but you signed up for it, and we are all here to protect all citizens, no matter how you slice it. And let's be honest, we're not talking about that guy who has a gun pointed at you. But we all are taking that off of the table. We're talking about those unarmed people who are Black and white. And again, we're all here to change the world in whatever way we can, because it's the right thing to do.
A police perspective, what do you say about what Dr. Joffrey Mount Varner just mentioned, as well as Nikessa Craig, about police officers? And because you've been in those situations where it could go sideways real quickly on you trying to protect and serve people.
It's, and I think a lot of the incidents that have happened, what people go through during critical incidents, and like Doc said, not talking about the incidences where there's a gun involved or situations where we have unarmed people who have been killed by police officers. That's a cop out to me, that, I'm in fear of my life and I did X, Y, and Z. It truly is. I've been involved in shootings, unfortunately in 27 years of doing what I do. But the thing about it is it goes back to people's core motivation as to why they do what they do and why they decided to take this position. And it's so unfortunate that the screening processes or the vetting processes for hiring can't be perfect. People wake up and they go through these careers with, 10, 20, sometimes less than that. And then it finally manifests itself and then it's caught and we all see it. Luckily, we're in a different world now where we get to see these things, but we can only imagine how many things happened that we don't get to see or didn't get to see. And I think it spotlights the importance of law enforcement agencies to monitor constantly and put certain steps in place to ensure that these individuals who don't have the best interest of people that look like me or people period in mind, to weed them out. And there has to be some type of systems in place to ensure that these individuals are identified and weeded out before something tragic happens. It shouldn't take for someone to die for agencies to realize, oh wow, we have an individual that was not cut out for this position.
We'll continue with our panel and the discussion about police reform next. Nikessa, let me bring you in because mentally, I still want to go back to that. The whole country is under stress. There's a lot of high anxiety out here, and police officers are human. They have wives, they have husbands, they have children, they have family. And when they go out on the streets, they might be thinking about, all I want to do is get back home. I want to serve this time that I'm on. But they may be bringing other baggage like Josie was talking about. The other baggage could be racism. The other baggage could be whatever they went through that day. And does that impact the way they respond to some of the crises that we've seen going on between police and the Black community?
Absolutely. And what I'll say is that I feel like I have a unique position at times because I'm someone who often treats the victims of these situations and trauma and violence in our communities and on an individual level. That I'm also a provider who also treats and works with officers and those that serve our community. And so at the end of the day, we are all human and we are all grappling with multiple layers of stress and trauma. And the job of an officer is definitely one in which it would be important to be continuing to assess your mental health, to be able to actually talk about issues that are bothering you, because at the end of the day, we really are all human. So the stress is definitely a factor. I will say though that when it comes to racism and a lot of what we're seeing, those are attitudes, and those are beliefs. And the amount of stress that you're under may exacerbate your response to those things. But that is an individual issue that needs to be taken care of. I think that from a social worker perspective, something that is kind of left out of the dialogue a lot of times is the police culture. Even the idea of really making policing synonymous with de-escalation and synonymous with actually inserting peace instead of force. Those are bigger issues that I think could actually be tackled more within the police culture, more with how our laws are actually in place. So those are some of the considerations I would put out there. There are individuals acting on, racist attitudes, beliefs, previously experienced, but there also seems to be an issue with the culture in and of itself. And of course, that can vary location or jurisdiction to statewide.
Dr. Joffrey Montvarner, when you talk about police culture, thank you for that, Nikessa. Police culture is one of those, it's a unique culture, and we can bring Josie to talk about that, and Sergeant Major Keith Craig, but it's a unique culture. Do you experience that as a doctor in ER when people are coming in, maybe they've been apprehended by police? What's the culture that you see between that individual who might be a suspect and that officer who is in charge to make sure that that person is given due process?
That's an excellent question. What I have found is by the time they get to me, that interaction has changed, and I see the officer treating the suspect in a way of in a very human way, like, hey, you should have told me this, or you should have told me that. And even when the suspect's wrong, I see the officer treating them in a very compassionate way. Maybe because I am there, but I have witnessed that multiple times where the officer all of a sudden is treating them in a very compassionate way. But I want to go back to like one point, and that is the election. Let me tell you why, because it ties to everything that we just said. My favorite officer there, Officer Josie, just mentioned use of force policies. There was a study that was done in 2017 that said agencies that simply reviewed their use of force policies experienced a 75% decrease in violence against officers and a 25% decrease in violence against citizens. So, who determines the use of force policies? The local elected officials who appoints the police chief, and sometimes the police chief is the person running. So local elections are still so important. And one last point, during COVID, you can vote safely. So even if you have to go in and vote during COVID, mask, gloves, and a hand sanitizer, you can do it safely. And I talk to about 2 million people a week about COVID. So no matter what, be prepared to vote if you've got to go in.
We're coming back with more after this. I want to get to something that's really key here. I spoke to the police chief here in Washington, D.C., Peter Newsham, and he had taken a group of recruits to the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial so that they could see and reflect on history and the importance of treating Black people with respect. And they were Black, they were white, they were brown, they were all hues of the rainbow. And he said, it's important that we come here because of what our country is going through. And then one of the officers, a sergeant who's in charge of training those recruits, wanted to say, I can train them on policing, but there's some things that they should have come here with that was taught to them in their homes. I can't train them on how to deal with racism if they don't know it in their hearts. That impacted me, because we don't have this conversation enough in America about how do we help police officers think better about each other. And I know in the Army, I served not as long as you did, Keith, not 32 years, but there's a buddy system where you're checking on each other, making sure that your attitude is right. And I know in the Army, we dealt with racism by confronting it right where it is. Do we need that in society today? Do we need conversations like we're having right now, where we're getting eye to eye, nose to nose with police officers and the community, having an exchange between community and police, talking about how we deal with each other from here on out so that we don't have another Breonna Taylor?
Yes, I would say yes. And this is why, you know, even though we were going to war when I was in the military, going to Iraq, Afghanistan, or Syria, or so on and so forth, we would always have to take cultural awareness training. Even though they are our enemy, it benefits us to know what that culture eats, sleeps, thinks, feels like. it gives us an advantage strategically. So it's very important that the police officers know. That's why the R is for ratio. That's why it's very important that when a squad car comes into a community, there's somebody in that squad car that looks like somebody they're going to that house they're going to see. It's very important you understand that culture. So you may not feel threatened if there's a person in that car that looks like them people you about to go serve. So it's very important. And the last thing I want to point out is there's a huge significant difference between leadership and management. A lot of people that have ascended to the top in leadership positions because of whatever reason, whatever components they use to get there, but they're really only managers. So, and what you have is you have people that in these positions been there for years, or passed on their this leadership ability or leadership spaces to other people who look and talk like them, but they're not really leaders internally.
That impacts a lot. Josie, final word from you.
I think that we have a long way to go in this country. I think that our communities also need to know that they have a greater ability to control the outcomes of situations. And I talk to our communities and I tell people, I said, you dictate how your areas are policed. You dictate how many police are deployed in your areas. And I tell us we need to go back to the old school communities when on Saturday mornings, everybody came together collectively to clean their neighborhoods, sweep their streets. Those little things like that make a difference because crime, police deployment is predicated upon crime. The less crime, the less police deployment. The less police deployment, the lesser the likelihood of things going bad. And then the community has the understanding and the police have the understanding that we're operating in communities where people care and have care and concern for one another. And that's one of the biggest things that's missing in our communities altogether, having care and concern for one another as human beings. So I think that our communities need to, we need to all collectively work in our communities to build our communities back to where they were so that people just can't come in and treat us any old kind of way and understand that we are our brother's keeper on both sides, policing as well as community.
I want to thank you all. So Keith, a final word from you as we move forward, because United We Serve is all about your book about serving to lead. It's all about the life that you spent in serving the United States in terms of being a service member in the military, in the Army, 32 years. And it's all about how we serve, having a servant leadership. That's so important for our nation right now.
Yes, I just want to say, be the change that you want to see. When you go out in your community, help people that need help. Go help your public officials, go help your state officials, anybody that need help. Be that change you want to see, because it won't happen unless you're committed to what it is that you are committed to. So to me, it's just very important to be your best self at all times. Be a selfless leader, not a selfish leader. And as long as you're a selfish individual, you'll make America a better place.
I want to thank you, Sergeant Major Keith L. Craig, retired, for your service, and also thank you for your willingness to talk about leadership. Dr. Joffrey Mount Varner, appreciate all the work that you're doing as an ER physician. Nekesa Craig, licensed clinical social worker, and Lieutenant Jonathan Josie there in Philadelphia, doing the work that you're doing on the police department for 27 years. Stay safe, stay well, and continue to train other police officers to serve their communities well. We could have talked about anything today. There are protests in the streets, but we need to talk about leadership. We need to talk about how do we make a change. And while it's good to protest, it's also good to get out and vote. And it's very important that we have this kind of dialogue. So I appreciate all of you here talking about United We Serve. Let's keep on serving. Let's keep on doing the things that we need to do to lift up our communities and not tear them down. We'll be back with more after this. And welcome back. I'd like to thank all of the guests who appeared on tonight's program, and I especially want to thank each and every one of you. You know I truly appreciate you. As we go into the weekend, be mindful of the fact that we have to be focused on how we can be better and not bitter. Therefore, hopefully we've been righted, ignited, and united to keep spreading justice, faith, hope, love, freedom, and peace. We leave you now with Denise Graves singing At the Funeral of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Good night, everyone.
Who believed in sharing the blessings I've received? Let me know in my heart when my days are through. America, America, I gave my best to you. Each generation, from the plains to distant shore, with the gifts they were given, were determined to leave more. Valiant battles fought together, acts of conscience fought alone. These are the seeds from which America has grown. Let them say of me, I was one who believed in sharing the blessings I've received. Let me know in my heart when my days are through. America, America, I gave my best to you. For those who think they have nothing to share, who fear in their hearts there is no hero there. Know each quiet act of dignity is that which